Hi, all remote learners. Today we are going to be reading our textbook. And with our textbook, we're going to also go over our vocabulary. So we're going to go ahead and get started and read. Have you ever made shadow puppets? If you put your hand between a flashlight and a wall, you will make a shadow. You might have made a rabbit shape or other animal shapes with your hand. Your hand blocks the light from the flashlight. The sun shines on Earth like a giant flashlight. Light from the sun causes shadows that we can see here on Earth. The angle of the sun's light also causes a change in seasons from winter to spring to summer to fall. How else does Earth interact with the sun? So let's continue on. Before we begin reading the next part, we have here is a sundial. We're going to be reading about a sundial in a second, of how they were able to tell time based off of the shadow that it is showing right here. So let's go ahead and begin reading. How does shadows change during the season? Shadows are formed when an object blocks light. For example, when sunlight hits the metal piece of this sundial, it forms a shadow. So we can see here it forms a shadow that we have. The shadow can be used to tell the time of day. That is because the shadow changes shape during the day. When the sun first rises, it sits very low on the horizon. Sunlight hits objects at an angle that creates long shadows. In the middle of the day, the sun sits directly overhead. Sunlight hits objects at an angle that creates very small shadows. As the sun sets near the horizon, it creates long shadows again. This shadow points in different directions, though making a sundial useful to tell time. So again, the sun is hitting it based off of where it's at, and it can tell you the time. So based off of this right here, it's a Roman numeral 3. So that is 3 p.m. based off of what they're telling for time. So let's go ahead and continue on. So the shape of the shadow also depends on which season it is in. Earth's axis is tilted slightly off center. During our summer, the northern half of the Earth is tilted or leaning towards the sun. So the sun's light hits the northern half of the Earth at more direct angle. Because the sun is more directly overhead, shadows are smaller in the summer than in the winter. In the winter, the northern part of Earth is tilted away from the sun. This means the sunlight is not coming in as directly. So shadows during the winter are longer. Imagine you stood in the same spot 3 p.m. in the winter and in the summer. Your shadow would look longer in the winter. So let's go ahead and look at these pictures right here so we can see the different shadows that they have. So we have the shadow that is directly covering everything underneath this for this umbrella. And then we have this bike. So we can see that that the shadow is completely different of how we have it here. So you need to really think about how the shadow is, what the shadow is doing in the first picture and in the second picture. So let's go ahead and continue on. So we're not going to do the try now. We're going to look at the lookout. You may think that seasons happen because Earth is farther away from the sun in winter or closer to the sun in summer. This is not correct. Earth stays at almost the same distance from the sun all year. Seasons happen because Earth is tilted on its axis. During summer, the northern part of Earth is tilted towards the sun. The sun's light hits the northern part of the Earth more directly. The heat from the sunlight causes the warm weather of summer. During winter, the northern part of the Earth is tilted or leaning away from the sun. The sun's light does not shine as directly, causing cooler weather. So it also, you can also think about it, what we learned about when it comes to how the Earth is tilted towards or away from the sun when it comes to the shadow. So we know that season is dealing with that too, because we can see based off of what we just read on that. Let's continue on for the lookout. How does the moon's appearance in the sky change. We are able to see the moon because it reflects light from the sun. Have you noticed how the moon's shape changes during the month? The moon seems to get bigger and then it seems to get smaller. Sometimes it seems to disappear completely. So we will learn about this and you will do an activity over the moon this week. So let's go ahead and continue on reading. These changes happen in the same pattern or cycle. In fact, you can predict them. The sun always shines on half of the moon, but on Earth we cannot always see the sunlight half. This is because the moon moves around Earth in an orbit. At the beginning of each cycle, we cannot see the moon at all. The sunlit half of the moon faces away from Earth. Each time the moon rises, we see more of the moon. After about 2 weeks, we can see the entire sunlit half of the moon. Then the moon seems to get smaller again. As the days go on, we see less and less. At the end of the cycle, we cannot see the moon at all again. The pattern then repeats itself. So let's think about an orbit. It is a circular path of one object around another object. So it's orbiting around it. So we have, and then we will learn about our vocabulary in a few minutes of what they're talking about when it comes to orbiting. So let's continue on reading. As the moon orbits Earth, we see different parts of it. At the beginning of the cycle, we see very little of the moon. Midway through each cycle, we see a large part of the moon. Then again, we see little of the moon towards the end of the cycle. The picture of the moon on the outside circle shows the moon as it appears to someone viewing it from Earth throughout the cycle. So we can see here what it's talking about. So we can see how and what we can see and view from the sunlight. So this is the sunlight here. And so we can see that's what we'll see. And then that's what we'll see also. We'll see some of this. So all of this we can see based off of being on Earth. And that's where they can get what the moon phases are throughout the time. So let's continue on. Discover science, ancient cultures. Humans have noticed patterns on Earth for a very long time. For example, ancient Rome used sundials to tell time. We just talked about that not too long ago. The Romans noticed that the length and shape of shadows changed over the course of a day. They built sundials to allow them to keep track of the hours in a day. Ancient Chinese people used the moon's changing appearance to make a calendar. Each month was 29 days, the amount of time it takes the moon to orbit Earth. The beginning of a month that marked by a new moon. This calendar is still used to keep track of the Chinese holidays. So this is something you need to really think of. So from one new moon to the next new moon. So it goes from this new moon and it continues and does all the phases and comes back to the next new moon is 29 days. So you have from one new moon, it takes 29 days to get to the next new moon. So that is something that you really need to think about and really understand that we have all these phases to get to one new moon to the next for 29 days. So let's go ahead and go to our vocabulary. So we're going to go all the way up to our vocabulary. So our vocabulary starts with moon. It's very important for the moon so that we can talk about the orbiting. So what we just read about, and I told you we're going to get back to. So moon, a natural satellite that orbits a planet. Some planets have no moons and others have over 60 moons. So we have a moon and it does orbit, which means it makes a circular motion around. So it does orbit over Earth. So that is moon. Next is moon phases. Is the shape that shines on there, like what we've read about, the portion of the moon that you see that is on Earth. So again, we see this, and this is a full moon. So we can see how it goes in the direction to where we see where it's not visible. If it's not visible, that means it is a new moon that is happening. But this is a full moon because we can see the whole thing. So let's continue on. Pattern. Pattern is a design or sequence that is repeated. So a pattern, we can see in this picture, it has red, yellow, green, and it's a pattern because you can see that it happens and it's a sequential type of order that they have. Last is shadow. We learned about shadows when we did our Groundhog's Day. So it's something that's very important with this so that we know. So a shadow is a dark area made by blocking light from reaching a part of the surface. So we can see based off of this picture and then what we have learned when we did Groundhog's Day activity. So again, you're going to go into Teams, fill out your assignments, and it's going to be based off of your vocabulary. So make sure you have the correct punctuation, spelling, and sentence correct and complete sentences. If you do not, it will be counted off. So make sure you go back and check over your work before you submit it to me. Make sure you submit it and then you turn it in. I hope you all have a great day. See you later.